It's 7:42 in the evening. She's just walked in from work, and the grocery bag is still sitting by the door, forgotten already. She opens the utensil drawer to grab a whisk. Her hand moves past 4 gadgets she hasn't touched in a year, a rubber band ball she doesn't remember starting, a takeout menu from a restaurant that closed 2 years ago. She finds the whisk. But by then, the pot behind her is already boiling over. She stands there for a second, whisk in hand, stove hissing. And what she feels isn't really about the pot. It's a kind of tiredness that arrives before the cooking has even started. The sense that the kitchen itself was working against her before she touched a single ingredient. There's a quiet rule written into Japanese kitchens that nobody had to teach. And once you see it, you can't unsee how much the rest of us are working against it every single day. This isn't a story about tidiness. It's a story about what happens to the nervous system in the 10 seconds before dinner even begins. So stick with this one, because the 15th item on this list is the one that quietly rewires how your entire evening feels. Not just your countertop. For a long time, the working assumption, in Western kitchens especially, has been simple. More tools mean more capability. A gadget for every task. A backup for every backup. Prepared, in other words, means well-stocked. But researchers at UCLA found something closer to the opposite. As part of a 9-year study led by linguistic anthropologist Eleanor Oakes, UCLA's Center on Everyday Lives of Families followed American households into their actual homes. Not labs, not surveys, but kitchens, living rooms, the real clutter of real lives. Psychologists Darby E, then a postdoctoral researcher at UC, and Rena Repetti, a UCLA psychology professor, measured something the eye can't see. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, collected from saliva samples over the course of ordinary days. Families who described their homes in language tied to disorder and mess showed a measurably different stress hormone pattern than families who described their spaces as calm. Here is the equation that quietly breaks under that data. More tools does not equal more capability. Every extra object is one more decision. One more thing to wash, to store, to step around at 7:42 in the evening. Capability, it turns out, doesn't come from inventory. It comes from clearance. The first idea beneath a Japanese kitchen isn't about owning less. It's about a very specific kind of refusal. The discipline of a decision made before an object ever crosses the threshold. The Japanese call this Danshari, and it moves in 3 small, distinct acts: refusing what comes in, releasing what's already there, and detaching. Finally, from the need to keep any of it at all. Notice the order. It doesn't begin with the dramatic purge, the trash bag, the guilt-driven Saturday of throwing things away. It begins earlier than that, at the doorway, at the moment of acquisition. The free tote bag, the extra spatula, the gadget that seemed useful in a 2-minute video. This is where the shift happens, and it's a shift researchers keep circling back to. It's the shift from reaction to prevention. A cluttered kitchen isn't usually the result of one bad decision. It's the slow accumulation of 100 small ones, each too minor to notice on its own. There's a psychological concept called the ownership effect. The tendency to value something more simply because we already possess it, regardless of its actual usefulness. It's why the extra ladle stays in the drawer for 3 years. Not because anyone needs it, because it's already ours. Danshari interrupts that quietly, at the entrance, before ownership even has the chance to take hold. But refusal alone can turn cold. Discard too easily, too often, and a kitchen starts to feel disposable. A place where nothing is worth keeping, so nothing is worth caring for either. This is where the second concept steps in, and it changes the emotional temperature of the whole practice. It's called Mottainai, the deep, almost physical discomfort of waste. Not just wasted food, wasted time, wasted material, wasted attention. Mottainai is why the Danshari process is never careless. An item that no longer belongs isn't simply thrown away. It's passed on, given to someone who will actually use it. Because discarding without respect isn't minimalism. It's just a different kind of carelessness wearing a cleaner outfit. Here is the concept researchers refer to as productive struggle, and it applies surprisingly well here. The instinct, when facing a cluttered drawer, is to intervene fast. Sweep it all into a bag, feel the relief, move on. But that speed skips the actual decision. It skips the moment of asking whether this object was ever truly seen in the first place. So here is a zero-cost tactic worth trying tonight. Before anything leaves the kitchen, hold it for 10 seconds. Just 10. Not to decide whether to keep it, but to actually notice it, maybe for the first time in years. That single pause is where Mottainai lives. It's not sentimentality. It's attention, applied on purpose, for exactly as long as it takes to remember the object was ever useful at all. And now, the part of the practice that has nothing to do with objects at all. The deepest layer of a Japanese kitchen isn't what's kept, or even how it's kept. It's what's left empty, and treated as though the emptiness itself were doing something. This is called ma. It's often translated loosely as space, but the more accurate translation splits into two ideas: interval and space. The pause between things that gives everything else room to be noticed. A countertop with 3 objects on it doesn't feel bare. It feels considered. Each object has room to be seen as itself, rather than disappearing into a wall of competing shapes and colors. Some scholars treat ma primarily as an architectural idea. The space in a room, the pause in a piece of music, the silence between 2 words in a conversation. But the underlying principle translates cleanly regardless. Absence is not the same as lack. And this is where the neuroscience becomes genuinely interesting. A cluttered visual field doesn't just look busy. It behaves, to the nervous system, like unresolved information. Dozens of small, unfinished signals, each competing quietly for attention. The brain doesn't get to relax around clutter, because clutter is, in a very real sense, a room full of unanswered questions. Every object out of place is a tiny open loop. And open loops, psychologically, keep the nervous system in a low, humming state of vigilance. Not panic, nothing dramatic, just a background hum that never quite switches off. An empty stretch of counter does the opposite. It closes loops instead of opening them. There is nothing left to resolve, nothing left to scan for meaning, and so the eye, and by extension, the body, finally gets permission to land somewhere and stop. This is closer to what secure attachment research describes in an entirely different context: the presence of predictable calm rather than the absence of stimulation. A child who grows up with a consistent, regulated caregiver doesn't experience that consistency as boring. They experience it as safety. A nervous system that has learned, through repetition, that it doesn't need to stay braced. A kitchen governed by ma offers something structurally similar, not emptiness for its own sake. Predictability. The same 3 tools, in the same place, every single evening, so the brain never has to resolve the same small puzzle twice. And this is the difference between a temporary tidy-up and something closer to a permanent shift. A one-time declutter changes a room for a week, but a kitchen genuinely organized around ma changes a pathway. The small, repeated experience of reaching for a whisk and finding it instantly, of scanning a counter and finding it resolved, wires in over months, not days. It stops being an effort. It becomes an expectation the nervous system quietly relies on. That's the real difference between an organized kitchen and a Japanese one. One is neat. The other has been engineered, gently, to ask the brain for nothing at all. So here is one ritual worth starting tonight, and it costs nothing. Before bed, clear exactly one surface completely. Not the whole kitchen, just one counter, one shelf, one drawer. Let it sit empty overnight. Notice, tomorrow morning, what it feels like to encounter that single space before anything else has had the chance to land on it. It's a small thing. But small, repeated things are exactly how a nervous system learns what to expect from a room. Somewhere down the line, this stops being about the kitchen entirely. A person who grows up reaching into a drawer and finding exactly what they expect, every time, carries something quieter than tidiness into adulthood. A baseline sense that their environment can be trusted to cooperate with them, rather than work against them at 7:42 on a Tuesday evening. This has been a look into the psychology behind Japanese kitchen design, not a set of medical or clinical instructions. Just a way of noticing what our spaces are quietly asking of us. If tonight you clear that one surface and it changes even slightly how your kitchen feels tomorrow, pass it along to the person in your life who always seems to be searching for the whisk. This is a look at cultural and psychological ideas, not medical advice. If clutter feels tied to something heavier, a licensed professional is the better resource.